faithfully conveying value, interpreting great books from around the world. Hey, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today I'm going to share the story of weeds with you. Oh, hearing this book title, you might guess it's a botany book introducing common roadside plants and their futures. But actually, it's a beautifully written collection of nature essays, a history of how weeds have changed. As humans reshape nature, wild plants shift roles. Some become crops, others turn into weeds. The author's point is that the concept of weeds stems from humans forcing a split between wild and tame parts of nature. The weeds are boundary breakers, the unaffiliated minority, reminding us life can't always be neat and perfect. The author, Richard Mabey, is a member of the Royal Society of Literature and a naturalist. His major at Oxford University was philosophy and political economy. Mabey's academic background isn't in botany or ecology, yet his works often focus on plants and nature. So, why is he so fascinated with writing about this? That goes back to his life story. Mabey's family life was troubled. His father was an alcoholic, and his mother suffered from depression. During his adolescence, Britain was recovering from, West-West trauma, and his inner and outer worlds changed rapidly. Behind his house, there was an open area with dense plants, becoming his sanctuary to escape home's oppressive atmosphere. Nature has the power to heal and comfort. For young Mabey, staying connected to nature was crucial. His background in sociology and literature added a strong humanistic touch to his nature writing. The story of weeds is a key work in Mabey's natural history writings. The whole book has 12 chapters. Each chapter is named after a type of weed or plant. A book mentions plants like crown vetch, eupatorium, broadleaf plantain, pansy burdock, and fireweed, but the plants in the titles are just a hook. The author doesn't dwell on specific species, but weaves stories of wild plants around themes. In this book, Mabey digs into the traces of weeds in human culture, exploring several questions with readers. First, how are weeds defined? Second, what are the ways weeds spread? Third, what connections do weeds have with human life? Fourth, how has human understanding of weeds changed over time? First, let's dive into the first question. The stars of this book are various weeds. So can you accurately define what a weed is? The author also finds this question tough. What is a weed? This isn't a botany issue at all, not even ecology. It's a cultural sociology problem. In any language, folks use weeds to mean plants that get in our way. But in different cultures, the species called weeds ain't the same. However, plants labeled weeds share common traits. They refuse to be controlled by human will. They don't need humans to survive, but are great at grabbing opportunities we create. So weeds ain't fixed. Any plant in the wrong place or wrong time might be seen as a weed. Factors that turn plants into weeds include location changes, shifts in human taste, and so on. For Chinese readers, water hyacinth from South America is a prime example. In China, it's commonly called water gourd. In the early 1900s, water hyacinth with pretty flowers was brought to China. It was used as an ornamental plant and animal feed, but with livestock farming, changes, water pollution, and global warming, it soon became a nuisance in southern China's rivers, hogging oxygen, turning water foul, and putting other life at risk. But thistle, originally from Scotland, is another classic case. Thistle is a super resilient wildflower. In the 18th century, Australia got its first British immigrants. Oh, someone was thrilled when they first saw thistle from home, carefully wrapping it in newspaper and weighing it down with a stone. In just a few days, that little plant grew real pretty. That British immigrant bragged about it everywhere, feeling mighty proud. But in just 20 years, thistle had spread all over Australia, becoming a harmful weed that needed laws to yank out. Each plant can produce tens of thousands of seeds, aggressively taking over pastures and growing into dense thickets that livestock can't penetrate. Besides foreign plants becoming weeds, native plants can also become unwelcome when they don't meet certain aesthetic standards. For example, in upscale U.S. neighborhoods that value neatness, homeowners must maintain evergreen lawns. Lawns consume far more pesticides than crops. A yard with native wildflowers would seem out of place in such communities. Houston's local regulations clearly state that having weeds or bushes on any property under real estate jurisdiction is illegal. Under this ordinance, weeds are defined as any uncultivated plant over 23 centimeters tall. By this standard, two-thirds of native U.S. plants would become illegal in Houston. Changes in aesthetic taste also alter what's considered a weed. For instance, traditional English gardens favored orderly styles and heirloom roses. When wild gardening became popular, plants like dead nettle, poppy, marigold, mallow, and forsythia shed their weed status and became ornamental flowers. Social progress and changing tastes can elevate weeds to desirables or demote cherished plants to outcasts. Lamb's quarters are such a plant with a roller coaster history. Long ago, English farmers used this common weed for compost. Its oil-rich seeds even made it a crop for oil production. But with sugar refining's rise, lamb's quarters became a pest by interfering with crops like sugar beets. Now they've returned to fields as livestock feed. These examples show plants can shift from beauties to weeds or vice versa. The plants themselves don't change, only the location and era do. Whether they're harmful or ugly depends entirely on human needs. Throughout the book, questions about defining weeds weave through every chapter. The author uses this approach to spark our reflection on nature. The second question, what are the ways weeds spread? Maybe argues humans clearly see that many weed troubles are self-inflicted. Wars, migration, commerce, even gardening preferences create opportunities for weeds to expand territories. Plants evolved aggressive growth traits get fully unleashed through human activities. These plants move from land to land, culture to culture, leaving vivid marks. For wild plants to become unwelcome weeds elsewhere, they gotta be expert stowaways, because migration is the oldest spreading path. Such journeys began as early as the Neolithic Age. When ancient humans migrated, they carried edible seeds as food, and seeds surviving chewing took root while inedible ones stuck to feet, tools, or fur. After global trade began, plants traveled farther by hiding in imported crops, beer or wool materials, or clinging to stone crates worldwide. Their clever seed spreading tricks are endless, all to go further and multiply. Burdock seeds evolved tiny hooks to hitch rides on fur, inspiring Velcro. Shepherd's purse fruits are like tiny, triangular wallets holding seeds that turn sticky in damp soil to cling to animal feet. Once seeds reach new lands, they sprout fast. Tumbleweed from Eastern Europe or Asia is a classic rapid grower. Tumbleweed seeds can sprout in just 36 minutes, arriving in the US as weeds but becoming cultural icons in Wild West films. Yes, you could say they hit the big time. Oh, from the 15th to 19th centuries, during the Age of Discovery and colonialism, European colonization caused massive weed expansion. Some plants, harmless in their homelands, often explode in new environments without natural checks, becoming destructive weeds that devastate local ecosystems. During the conquest of the Americas, Spaniards, British, and French left various European plants in their wake. Many European grasses soon became troublesome weeds. European grasses had adapted to repeated grazing, reproducing via rhizomes, while Native American plants hadn't faced such animal pressure. So when facing these resilient European invaders, they naturally lost ground. Take ragwort, a European favorite that quickly spread along rivers after reaching America, turning Hudson wetlands into impenetrable purple thickets, even reaching fragile Alaskan marshes. The same happened in Australia. Nearly any foreign plant there could become a nuisance weed. Oh, when capeweed from South Africa invaded Australia, it caused unexpected issues. caper white butterfly larvae could eat cape weed, which should have controlled it, but the weed grew so wildly it caused butterfly swarms large enough to darken the sky. In 1889, it even forced a train to emergency stop in a tunnel. As butterflies made wheels slip on tracks, nearly causing derailment, showing how weed spread creates bizarre consequences. The second spreading path is war. Battlefields meant death but became feasts for weeds. WWI explosives contain nitrates and potash, key fertilizer ingredients. So after WWN, weeds monopolized space and nutrients and bombed buildings and fields. They thrived. During 211, London endured thousands of tons of German bombs. In ruins, weeds like fireweed, mustard, and poppies flourished. For them, bombing was massive tilling. Explosives became fertilizer. The earth's violent shaking helped scatter their seeds. Near 201's and Professor Edward Salisbury, director of Kew Gardens, gave a speech at a London bomb site. He told everyone a new ecosystem had risen from the city's wounds. He recorded 126 kinds of weeds in London's ruins. People never expected war to bring a weed storm. In the 1960s, the Vietnam War triggered even more devastating weed growth. To deny cover to Viet Cong guerrillas, the U.S. military sprayed 12 million tons of defoliants on Vietnam's primeval forests. Over 50 years later, areas once covered in dense rainforest now have only kogon grass, originally ground cover in Southeast Asian forests. Whenever trees shed leaves and sunlight shines, kogon grass grows. Once shade returns, it quietly retreats. And after forests were permanently defoliated, kogon grass wildly covered the entire woodland. Now, this plant is slowly killing surrounding Southeast Asian forests. In recent years, kogon grass snuck into the U.S. in packaging and started ravaging southern states. Oh, in a way, this seems like revenge. Surprisingly, people's love for nature became the third force driving weed spread. Although this cause is gentler than migration and war, its impact is equally huge. Without botanists' curiosity and gardeners' aesthetic tastes, many plants might never have left their homelands. For example, in the UK, a common weed called ragwort came from Sicily. In the 18th century, botanists brought it as a sample to the Royal Botanic Gardens, and they unapologetically escaped. The plant felt at home in railway ballast like volcanic ground and spread along the tracks. They contain alkaloids and toxins. If livestock eat them, they stagger, convulse, or even die. Loved by gardeners, Japanese knotweed from Japan and China came to Europe. It's aggressive, with roots constantly expanding to choke other plants. People nicknamed it Hancock's curse because the gardener who spread it was named Hancock. When building London's East End Olympic venues, the UK government spent huge efforts clearing Japanese knotweed. This plant nearly sustained the whole UK weed control industry. Wild, untamable plants bring trouble to humans, but also hide mysterious benefits. Next, the third question. What's the connection between weeds and human life? Since civilization's dawn, wild plants have been our first vegetables, oldest medicines, earliest dyes, and most convenient fuels. And humanity's future remains deeply tied to wild plants. Let's talk agriculture's entanglement with weeds. A crucial milestone was domesticating wild plants, selecting plump seeds to cultivate and pass down good genes. Ancient Mesopotamians tamed wild emmer wheat, Mesoamericans domesticated teosinte, East Asians cultivated wild rice, giving us wheat, corn, and rice as crops, and thus creating the concept of weeds. But weeds aren't purely harmful to agriculture. Agriculture began 7,000 plus years ago in Mesopotamia, with fields mostly on hills and near water sources. Without weeds, anchoring soil between crops, erosion would have been unimaginably fast. You could say early agricultural prosperity depended on weeds. Weeds also intertwined deeply with human diets. At 3,500 BC, settlement sites, archaeologists found proof that plants now called weeds were daily food. In times of scarcity, Wild carrot, oat, even nettle and mallow often ended up in soup pots. Even today, many enjoy spring foraging for shepherd's purse and Indian aster, a ritual that reconnects us with nature's rhythms. Weeds, another vital role in human life. Medicine. In medieval Europe, Christian culture both feared and envied weeds' uncontrollable vitality, believing consuming them granted mystical powers. Plants' true secrets weren't yet understood, and plant knowledge linked to witchcraft. So most remedies came from speculation, like plantain's trample resistance, making it a wound healer. Dandelion's urine, like yellow color, had it prescribed for urinary diseases. Walnuts resemble the brain and are thought to be good for head diseases. Burdock, with its small hooks, is believed to draw out snake venom. Coincidentally, people actually gained some knowledge from these witchcraft practices. For example, plantain leaves contain rich tannins and can indeed act as an astringent to stop bleeding. For modern people, the practical value of weeds is an important part of nostalgic feelings. For instance, in the UK, gorse growing vigorously in the countryside is collected as fuel for home bread ovens. Inedible old mustard plants burn with a stable flame and can be used for brickmaking. Another example, before the rise of the petroleum industry, roadside plants like madder, gardenia, magnolia, indigo, and mugwort were important sources of dye for clothing. Today, their dyeing properties are still cherished by nature-loving people. With the advancement of science and technology, humans have further discovered the precious value of wild plants. And wild plant species are diverse, forming a huge gene bank. Their germplasm resources will bring more possibilities for our future. For example, the story of bananas is very typical. Bananas actually have many varieties, but those sold in markets come from asexually propagated plants, making their genes uniform. With the disappearance of rainforests, wild bananas are becoming increasingly rare. In the 1950s, Panama disease struck, a fungal disease that causes banana trees to gradually rot and wither. At that time, the most important banana varieties worldwide became extinct due to this fungal disease. Oh, only the Cavendish banana from the Indian Ocean, Mauritius, was immune to this disease. Since then, the bananas we eat are descendants of Cavendish bananas. The problem is, now a mutated Panama disease has struck again, and even Cavendish bananas may not resist it. Not only would the banana industry collapse, but it could also cause famine in some areas. Now, scientists are searching wild bananas for immune varieties, hoping to save the banana industry through hybridization or genetic modification. Besides rich genes, wild plants also contain complex compounds, which is another huge treasure trove. A typical example is the discovery of artemisinin, a compound extracted from a weed called sweet wormwood, used to treat malaria. According to WHO data, in 2013, 620,000 people worldwide died from malaria, and artemisinin will save thousands of lives. The 21st Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded to the discoverer of artemisinin. To you, regardless of whether she's treated as a weed or not, people are gradually realizing the true value of wild plants. Therefore, seed banks have been established worldwide to preserve wild plant germplasm resources, hoping to rescue wild plants before climate change and land destruction. In such seed banks, all wild plants are treated equally. In Maybe's view, it's impossible to draw a clear line between tamed and wild plants. Human attitudes toward weeds have shifted from indifference, disgust, fear, to curiosity and exploration. People are gradually realizing that it's not weeds that should be constrained, but human arrogance and hubris. Moreover, unknowingly, weeds have deeply rooted themselves in human culture. The author dedicates several chapters to outlining the hidden threads of weeds in culture. From this, you can see how human understanding of weeds has changed over time. The first stage, from ancient Greece to the Middle Ages, people's overall attitude toward weeds was disgust and indifference. Although In Aristotle's time, people had begun to observe wild animals and plants meticulously. This tradition was interrupted in the Middle Ages. The Christian church, out of fear of witchcraft, blocked people's interest in wild plants, and related knowledge couldn't accumulate. During this period, you couldn't even find a plant painting that could identify species. On the other hand, we can see this discussed from the names of weeds in the Middle Ages. At least 20 plants were associated with the devil. For example, chamomile was called devil's daisy, belladonna was devil's berry, dodder was devil's net, and dandelion, because it has white sap, it was called devil's milk bucket. Every year at midsummer, bundles of agricultural weeds were thrown into bonfires. Flames represent the sun's heat burning, and weeds represent the demons that drive away and hinder farming. At this stage, weeds were completely exiled from the knowledge system. The second stage began around the 15th century, when weeds received relatively tolerant treatment, becoming sources of poetic inspiration and mediums for emotional exchange. This is vividly reflected in Shakespeare's literary works. If we carefully analyze the flower wreaths in Ophelia's scenes, King Lear's crown, and Titania's flower beds in Shakespeare's masterpieces, botanists can identify the species of native British plants from them, while folklorists can list their cultural symbolism at the time. The In the early 16th century, German painter Albrecht Dürer created his masterpiece, The Great Piece of Turf, which meticulously depicts real weed communities, marking a new attitude toward observing nature. From the 17th to 19th centuries, natural history entered its golden age. Some people recognized weeds as vital parts of nature, shifting attitudes from Dark Age superstition to Age of Reason curiosity. Darwin was fascinated by weeds. He tested saltwater's effect on seed germination, grew seeds from locust droppings, and grew over 80 weed species from mud on a partridge's leg. He conducted history's first quantitative experiment on weed competitiveness in a small plot. This plot randomly sprouted 357 weed species. After the 19th century, naturalist Edward Salisbury also studied weeds passionately. To test wind dispersal, he stood on a 3-meter ladder, dropping seeds to time their descent. Bodleia's winged fruits floated 5 seconds. Ragwort's parachutes flew 8 seconds. Coltsfoot took 21 seconds. Fireweed's feathery seeds won a full minute. Oh, these fascinating explorations expressed people's curiosity about the weed world. After the 20th century, attitudes toward weeds entered a third phase. Anxiety coexists with reflection. This is weeds' golden age of global conquest, but also when humans confront their dangers. Due to wars and trade, weeds spread worldwide. People realized the unprecedented ecological damage from invasive plants, creating deep anxiety. We discovered that no matter how powerful we think we are, or how many herbicides we develop, we can't truly control wild, untamable weeds. In 2007, American journalist Alan Weissman published The World Without Us. This book describes the scene. With the decline of the auto industry, about 1/3 of Detroit was abandoned, and weeds like kudzu and tree of heaven took over. Swaying weeds are reclaiming land occupied by industrial society. They seem to tell us that an oil-dependent industrial civilization is unsustainable. During this period, reflection on nature grew from anxiety. People realized those indestructible weeds would eventually integrate into foreign ecosystems and cultures. In Earth's biosphere, civilization must reach an understanding with wildness. Though Maybe tells British weed stories, this book holds equal significance for China amid urbanization and globalization. If you know plants around you, you'll find most weeds mentioned here accompany us too. Crown vetch, Eupodium. In China, it's widely distributed in Anhui and Sichuan, cultivated as medicine. Plantain often sprouts spike-like inflorescences on field ridges and lawns. Pansy and beauty is the familiar garden flower, we can start with this book to appreciate weeds, follow them through history and culture, and contemplate humanity's relationship with nature. All right, that's the story of weeds. We'll end our reading here. Find notes below the audio. See you tomorrow.